Hey everybody, welcome back. I've got some video clips that I'm going to show of this right after I got it. I was going to make a more coherent video of sort of restoring this gun and putting it back together, but things didn't work out that way. I got busy, so I'm just going to intermix some clips of when I got this thing. So what it is, it's a H&R Sportsman. It is a 22 top break revolver. This particular one was manufactured in 1941. You can tell that by the B prefix on the serial. They started putting prefixes on there in 1940, A being 1940, B being 1941. I have not had a 22 revolver before, and I wanted something a little bit nicer than like a Ruger Wrangler, but not quite as expensive as a Smith & Wesson 617, which goes for about $1,000. So instead, I hopped on Gunbroker and found this for about 110 bucks, I think. I mean, it was rough when I got it. It did function, but it just looked a little rough. But I can't find any takedown, cleaning, maintenance videos on this thing on YouTube. So we're gonna make one and show you how it's done. It's not horrible. It's got some small bits and pieces, but it's really not too bad. So let's get into it. And really, this is all the tools that I think I'm gonna need. It's been a few days since I took this apart, so hopefully I'm remembering right. Small hammer, small punch, flathead, that's on Phillips now. There we go. Large and small flathead screwdriver, and a pick. There are a couple of very small parts, and I'm going to tell you right now that the thing that I almost lost, it's hard to see. There's a little wire clip on either side of this post here. If you lose those, I feel very bad for you. I almost lost one. It took me a couple hours to find one. But yeah, that's the basic tools that you're going to need. And obviously I've already shown clear, but again, pop it open, obviously we're clear. And just to show, it is double action only, and everything does function before we start working on this thing. So let's get into it. Alrighty, so I'm not going to be able to see. I did forget one thing. A bench block, you can either have, a real bench block, or you can be like me and just have a piece of wood with a hole drilled through it. Alrighty, so the very first thing that we're going to do is to take the grip off. There is a single flathead screw in here. Pull that out. Now there's several variations of this. This is an early model. Obviously, well, I wouldn't say obviously. Early models have a single piece grip. They do not have a transfer bar, so this is probably a bit simpler than some of the later model ones. But it should be fairly close. So the first thing that we need to do is to get the strut and the hammer spring out of here. And it is impossible for you to see, but there's a spring here, there's a rod inside that's the strut, there's this little retainer piece, and then when the hammer is cocked, the strut actually goes into, there's a hole in the back of the grip here that the strut protrudes into. But there is a very small hole drilled crosswise through this strut. First time I took this apart, I really struggled with it. But if you have a small enough implement and you cock the hammer carefully enough, right there, you can actually capture that. So if you do that, it's going to make removing this quite a bit easier. You can kind of pull up, oof, and slide it out. It's that is wrong. So we're going to put that back. I need this takes some fiddling, and I'll show you once it's all apart exactly what I'm talking about. But this is kind of fiddly. So there's the hole. I may need something actually smaller. Yeah, I think I need something smaller. Hang tight just a minute, I'll find something smaller. I think we got it. It's just a little piece of wire. So, here we go. Line that up, maybe like go through? There. Okay, that's better. All right, and once that's through, then you can carefully, maybe, oh my, the damn rod is too long and it's binding. There we go. Come on out of there. There. That is a bit of a fiddly process. So you can obviously pull this back with your fingers and, you know, completely disassemble this part of it. I'm not going to, because it was kind of a pain in the ass to get back together. But yeah, so take this and just set it off to the side. So now you really don't have much, if any, pressure under the hammer there. There's a couple of springs in this area that we'll look at here in a minute. So this may not be necessarily the right way to do it, but it's the way that seemed easiest for me. The next thing I'm going to do is actually to separate the barrel and cylinder assembly and the frame. So that's just one screw right here. Oh, my flathead here is not quite sharp enough for that. All right, pull that screw out. And we'll set that off to the side. Now, when you take these apart, this just wiggles loose. But be careful, because this part here is what makes the ejector work. And look at that, and that orientation, and it slips in there. It goes right up in there, right in this slot here. And if you notice this hook, this sharp hook here, it's going to be a little bit tough to show on camera, but I'm going to grab, I thought I was going to grab the ejector. All right, so you see right down in there, that little gap, that hook grabs that, and that's what pushes the ejector up. So we're going to set this off to the side for a minute, because really the barrel assembly is the easy part. I'm gonna put those two pieces together and set them off over there. And we'll just concentrate on the frame at this point. So the next thing, I remember how I did this before, because there's a piece, the trigger has a little hook that goes up in here. I think the hammer will just come out now. So let's try that. Move this screw. Not quite. I don't think that's right, because that still feels like it's under spring pressure. So I'm gonna spin that back in. Not all the way. All right, now I do know this pin right here is what holds the whole trigger guard in place. When this pin comes out, the lock, it's not the lock, what is that? The little bit that interfaces with the cylinder here to keep it from rotating, whatever that's called, that comes out. And also the hand is all kind of part of this as well, but that stays in there. That nub comes out, and also if you'll notice, this small little silver piece here behind the trigger is a safety mechanism that only allows the hammer to drop fully when the trigger is pulled, because no matter how hard you push now, the hammer will not actually protrude through the face here, but when that is depressed, you might be able to see the tip of the hammer protruding. All right, so I've rambled enough. Next thing we'll do is pop this pin out. We'll grab my cheap ass bench block here, and we'll do a little tappy tap. Should not be that hard. Just let the weight of the hammer do the work. pin drops free. So I'm going to leave that in there because right now that's capturing everything. Here's my pin, which honestly does not look great, but you know, the gun is, what, 80 something years old now? All right, so I'm going to put some upward pressure on the trigger guard here, pull my punch out, and then the trigger guard will drop free. Don't freak out, just take a glance at how all this goes together here. So we've got the trigger guard, we've got our safety dingus there, there's a spring that is not really captured in any way, so it was kind of oriented like this, and then we'll grab this piece here, which sort of sat like that, and if you'll notice right here, there's a place for that spring to slot down in there, and that just sort of sits in the gun like that. So we'll take all these pieces, we'll set them off to the side. Like I said, the spring is not captured, it just sits in a hole. We'll put it off to the side. Now, the next thing, let's pull the trigger out, I think is the next thing to do. So again, we're going to, it's mostly over that hole. Maybe not. Alright, it would be better if I had like a proper bench block, and they are not expensive. I really should just buy one. I'll do it like this. Again, punch, and again, just very lightly with the hammer. That pin slides out a little easier. So I'm hitting something there. I think the triggers, yeah, the triggers maybe not lined up. Actually, I'm going to leave that sticking out of the side. A little bit of pressure there, and then we'll see what comes free. Okay, so there feels like there is a spring up in there. Oh, right there. And, yep, there we go. Okay, so this hook right here interfaces with the surface on the hammer, and this spring, again, not captured. Let me spin this around. I'm going to pull the hand out as well. Here's your orientation of the hand, right like that. And if memory serves, yeah. So the hand actually sat right there, and I believe this whole thing went in as a unit like that up in the gun. So we're going to kind of leave that together. Now notice this spring here, if you take the frame and flip it over, it sits right there. It's not much of a pin, but it's a little bit that kind of captures the trigger spring there. I'm not going to pull this pin out anymore, we don't really need to. And the only thing left on the frame now is the hammer. I knew I did that out of order. Take that screw out, pull that out, and then the hammer comes out. Just like that. And just like that, the frame is apart. All right, so we can take a look at how this works, sort of. You can see right here, there's the interface between the hook on the trigger and, oh, I got that facing the wrong way around. Right there. That's how that interfaces. And, oh, that's where that spring goes. I forgot about that. Do you see this? Very hard to see. There's a tiny, tiny hole right there. The tail of that spring goes in there. And then this hooks onto that post. Right there, right like so. And then that all slides back up into the gun. So I'm going to leave that assembled and set it off to the side. Alrighty. At this point, obviously, you could clean all this stuff. I know it doesn't look particularly clean, but I, trust me, have cleaned this. It's just old. Now, next part here is to remove the cylinder. And the way you do that is apply some upward pressure like with your thumb. And there's a little tiny tab here. Push down on that, and then the cylinder will come right out. Now, this piece, that little spring-loaded piece there that holds the trigger in, you can actually remove that. You push the tip down right like that, and then kind of push it up with your thumb. And if you were to keep pushing, it would come out. And the tail of this slots inside this tube right here. I kind of struggled to get that back in there, so I'm not going to take that apart. And the next thing, if you want to take it out, and I did take it down a bit farther when I was rebluing it, or, you know, boiling it and trying to get the finish back. The next thing you can do is to remove the sight. There's a flathead screw right there, a flathead screw right there. Back those out. The sight blade will come out. And on the front here, you can adjust the elevation of the front sight with this flathead screw here. So spin that out, pull that out, and then you can take this pin very carefully out, and that will free up your front sight blade. There's a little spring under the back side here. Hopefully that's a clear enough way to explain it. I'm not going to take it apart for this video. It was a real pain. The front sight was not bad. This was a pain in the butt to get back together, because once you take the rear sight out, you got to deal with this kind of toggle or lock or whatever you want to call it. So, pointed this out earlier, but there's a little tiny wire clip right here. There's one on each side. You pull one of those off, you lose it, it shoots across your shop. You search for 2 hours, finally find it on the floor. And then when you go to snap it back on, you miss several times and lands on the floor again. Anyway, take that wire lock off, press that pin out. Then you'll also remove this pin, which is actually, it is a stop. It's what prevents the lock from going up any further than that. And then you can remove the section here that pivots. You can remove it off the top of the barrel. And underneath, there's a coil spring in a hole right here with a ball bearing that sits on top, which provides the detent for that. And that's all the pieces of the barrel there. Alrighty, putting this thing back together. There is actually something I forgot. And the whole reason that I took this apart in the first place was to replace the trigger guard. Because I don't know if you can tell or not, this was broken at some point, and somebody actually kind of welded or brazed on a new piece there. One thing that you are going to need when you put this back together is a small pin. I have a finishing nail that I filed to the exact right length. If it'll come out of here. There we go. Now, granted, this is the old trigger. Whoop, that was the part that I dropped. So you need something like this. Again, this is just a cut finishing nail, and it needs to be exactly the width of the trigger guard like this. It cannot protrude on either side at all. Actually, I'm going to put a couple more strokes of the file on this, because you need a pin to hold this safety catch, or safety lever, I guess you could call it, assembled with all this as we put it together. So, the only other thing, the thing that I never took apart actually, was the ejector rod and the cylinder, because I looked at parts diagrams and I could not quite figure out how this came apart, and it actually does not look to be available, so I don't want to break it. I suspect that the smooth portion here is threaded onto this kind of pentagonal shaft, but I don't know for sure, and I've tried to loosen it with just my fingers and it's not going anywhere, so we're going to leave that. You probably don't need to take that apart anyway. Yeah, so at this point you could clean the cylinder and clean all the other bits and pieces, and let's get back to putting this back together. Give me 1 second. All right, I'm not going to Chilton's manual and just say the assembly is the reverse of removal, because there are a couple of gotchas in here. You're going to see me struggle here in a bit, getting everything lined up, but you know, that's the reality. One thing I'm going to do to prep is I'm going to pull, oh my gosh, there we go. My wire here was actually sticking up a little bit past that lock, and it made it kind of hard to take out, so we're going to pull it back flush, give us a little more room to work. Also, I like to put a dab of grease right there, because this part, where's my hammer? Here it is. This part interfaces with the hammer right here and slides on it some. So, you know, just make that a little bit smoother. All right, let's get to it. First thing we want to do is put the hammer back in the hole. So we'll slide the hammer. Actually, you know what? I'm going to put a little bit of grease inside that hole as well. Alrighty. Slide our hammer back in here, right about there, and then we'll take our pin, screw rather, I should say, and drop it back in. Okay, that's happy. Alrighty. Next bit, I guess, is to put the trigger back in. And what I'm actually going to do, I said I wasn't going to, I'm going to fully remove this pin, because the trigger just kind of wants to go in from a certain direction, and it's easier if we start the pin over here. Is that the trigger pivot? Yeah. It's easier if we start the pin from over here, because then, did I do that? I did that wrong. Damn it. I did that wrong. Okay. Take that out. I'm going to take this and put it in this side. There we go, Jared. And you don't want it sticking through the frame. We just want to kind of hold the pin in place. There we go. Because when I slide the trigger assembly back in there, all this stuff just kind of sits together, and it's easier if we go at it from this direction. All right, that's up there. And no, that's not it. My hook. I do remember this being a pain. Maybe I should do the... I think that's what I did. Okay, I think I put the trigger assembly back in, and then I kind of scooped the hammer in from the back to sort of capture that stuff. So let's try that. It may work a little better. And out, hammer out. The trigger up in here. Look, gotta be careful. There we go. There's the spring where it needs to be. Oh, damn it. Yeah, this is the real bitch of the assembly process right here. I am actually going to, oh, hell. Hopefully. Nope. Okay, what I need to do, you can see that my spring is lined up correctly. Right there. Get in there, right there. what I need to do is to put something temporarily in through the side of the frame to hold that together right there. That is much easier said than done. Oh, I think I got it. It's impossible for you to see right now. I do apologize. All right, I'm gonna hold the punch in my mouth. And then try and, right there. Okay. And give that a little tap in. I don't know if that's lined up. I think it is. There it goes. Okay, had to finagle that, but it did slip through there. Notice how I didn't beat on anything super hard. I just sort of tapped it until it felt right. All right, so we're through both sides of the trigger. It's lined up. We just got to get it home. That does not really want to go. Oops. There it went. Just need a little more persuasion. All right. So that actually appears to work correctly because you can see the hand there protruding through the rear face. All right, and at this point I do want to apologize. A lot of that last section you just saw the top of my head, which is less than ideal. I'll try and do better about that going forward. But anyway, so that's in there now. We've got the hand operational, and if you look down in here, I actually haven't used this pick. The only thing I used the pick for was to get that little wire lock off of there before. So you can see right there the hook that interacts with the hammer. So now I'm going to pull the trigger so that's all the way up and out of the way and drop the hammer in. There we go. And I can capture the hook with the hammer and kind of drop our hammer pivot screw in. There we go. That felt good. Didn't get it all the way through. There it is. Cool. Yeah, that's definitely the order that this should be done in. That was much easier. And now you can see when you pull the trigger, it activates the hammer. All right, so I would like to tell you that the hard work is done, and it almost is, but there's a little bit more that's needed. And actually, there is yet another piece of equipment I need that I forgot about. So let me dig some out of the trash here. So you can do this with a rubber band. In my case, I'm going to use a little bit of copper wire because the next thing that we've got to do is reassemble this trigger mechanism here. In order to do that, you have to hold this piece into the trigger guard with our super duper extra special pin here. And then once it's all in there, you actually have to tie it back in order to prevent it from, it has to be flush, you'll see, in the trigger guard to enable it all to go into the gun in the first place. So we'll do that here in just a second. All right, so you'll notice right here, this flat surface is actually what this spring rests on. So what you want to do is orient it so that you're pushing basically straight down. Oh, and not do that. This is going to take several tries. Hopefully it won't be quite as bad as the hammer assembly. Put that in there. Damn it. And there we go. really gotta, hell. Ideally, you need 3 hands for this. Ugh. Yeah. These tweezers will just hang on to our little pin until we're ready to let it go. Try and keep my head out of the shot. All right, get that lined up. Drop that in there. Pivot that around. Okay, now you want to take your wire or your rubber bands or what have you, bring it around like this, and twist it tight. And we're going to put a little twist on this side too, hopefully. Tighten it up. All right, that's our goal. That's what we want to wind up with. This safety dingus there held back. Try and give it a little more. Okay. I think that'll do it. Okay. Now, this really just kind of, if you look up in there, you see the slot in the front of the trigger. You can barely make out the pin back in there. See the shiny bit right above the pointer right there? That's this pin, and that is the pivot point for the opening there. And that just sort of sits up in there. Then we're going to take our trigger guard and see that little divot in there. That's the home for that spring. So kind of, we're going to capture that spring like so. Put the front of the trigger guard in like that, and the back of the trigger guard in like that. And then it all sort of lines up, and we're going to take our pin here and carefully drive it through. All right, so our pin right there that's holding all that together dropped out. That's going through, it feels good. A couple more taps, and that's seated and home. Not sticking out on either side. Now we can take our copper wire or rubber band or whatever you're using off of there. And obviously there's no hammer spring on it right now, but if you keep a little bit of forward pressure on the hammer, you can see the trigger works as intended. The last thing to do, oh gosh, how did that go? I think it went like that. Yeah, pretty sure it went like that. Is to put our hammer spring back in, and we can sort of finagle that back in. Maybe it went the other way. No, that doesn't feel right. Let's go with that. Oh, there it is. Perfect. And pull back, release the spring pressure there. And we will have to, oh, is it lined up? So you do have to get the hammer strut here lined up with this hole here. But if you can pull the trigger and dry fire, that's done. So there's our frame back together. And for the cylinder, it's pretty simple. Actually, I'm not going to put that in all the way just yet because of how this hook has to go. So we're going to take this, slide that back in there, then take our cylinder, click it down, and then we can slide this back together, put our screw in. I may have done that a little bit out of order. Let's see. Nope, that works. And we're done. So I need to get a slightly sharper screwdriver and snug that up. But mechanically, we're done. The ejector works. So now, there's a screw still in there. I'm just going to take the grip back on there. Put the grip screw back in. And we're done. So hopefully that helps somebody. I really like this thing. The trigger is a bit heavy, but double action only, I guess it has to be. But yeah, normally these sell for anywhere between $350 and $500 depending on condition. Like I said, I think I paid what, it's more than $100 but less than $200 for this thing. So yeah, there you go.